Okay, here we go. So, I'll be interviewing my grandmother today. Her name is Dolores Penton. She was a teacher for how many years? 18? A consultant for 11 years for a Scholastic Book Fair. And yes, I feel she was more than qualified to talk about these things. So, yeah, we'll just get right into it. So, how do you think where you lived, because you grew up here, right?
Right.
Okay, how do you think where you lived from pre-K to your senior year of high school affected your education?
I believe where I lived during my elementary school years had a very positive effect on my education. We actually lived in one area, but the kids, we attended school in another area. Right around the corner from our house was Shoto School. Mm-hmm. This is the school where the white students attended. Mm-hmm. We attended a school called Louverture, which had been built for black students. This school was 7 or 8 blocks from my house.
Okay, and then so Soto, that's the name of it. Shoto. Shoto was the all white school.
Yes.
Okay, and so were there any differences between the school other than the race? Like, where was the black school that you went to any less than the white school? You know what I mean? Like, were there any disadvantages you had or not at all?
No, as a matter of fact, I always felt we had many great advantages. Mm-hmm. Louverture was a brand new school. We had a boys and girls gym with a boys and girls locker room where we took showers every day. We had a full service cafeteria that served hot meals every day, or you could walk home for lunch if you preferred. We also had a full auditorium, a home ec room, a shop for the boys, but it was, as I said, built exclusively for the black students because we were not allowed to attend Shoto, although it was only a few steps around the corner from our house.
Okay, so you weren't allowed to attend because of segregation, right?
Yes.
And around what year was this? Was this like pre-Brown v. Board of Education, or?
I believe it was probably between the years of 1952 and 1954, because at some point, and I cannot remember what grade I was, but we were offered the opportunity to attend Shoto School. So our parents were given the chance to take us to visit the school and just have an opportunity to explore it. And we were allowed the choice to stay at Louverture, or because of where we lived, we could attend Shoto because it was so much closer to our house. My parents chose to leave us at Louverture, and I am so very grateful they did. Mm-hmm. I felt the teachers were so very caring of the students there. I don't feel that anyone was allowed to fall through the cracks. And by that, I mean the teachers were interested in your progress. Mm-hmm. They stayed in communication with your parents. And at that time, if you got in trouble at school, you were certainly in trouble at home. Mm-hmm. And so there weren't a lot of discipline problems in our school. Also, it was in the neighborhood where my church was located. My grandparents lived across the street from the school. My father's job was across the street from the school.
So you really had everything in that one area.
Right, in that one neighborhood, although we had a little walk to get to school every day.
Mm-hmm. So did you not want to go to Shoto because you would lose that sense of community, or did you did you feel like, because I mean, how was Shoto's education? If you like, had you ever heard of anything? Was it less? Was it better? How was it?
I really don't have any inkling of what their education was compared to ours.
Do you think you would have been better off, or do you think how you went, you know what I'm saying? Do you think that was
No,
beneficial?
I'm actually thinking I was better off staying at Louverture, because at some point in my life in adulthood, as I was preparing to go into education, it was interesting. I had an interview with someone who was determining if I would be accepted into a program. It was called Career Opportunities Program.
Mm-hmm.
And we were black teachers being trained at Harris to work with minority students in the city.
And so you're saying that you feel like the teachers were looking out for you more because you were of the same skin color?
I do.
Okay. So that, I mean, because you always hear about, like, oh, well, the white kids have it better because they have these computers. And I mean, I'm putting in more of a modern sense, but they have these computers and these opportunities. But you're saying that you think it was better at your school because, you know, there was a sense of community, people were looking out for you, and that you would have been better off where you were as opposed to the white school.
Yes. And also the things were reversed. Our school was the newer school. Shoto was a very old building with wooden floors and old classrooms. Louverture was bright and new and very modern.
Right. Okay. So I guess, so what do you see, what similarities do you see, or differences do you see in like living conditions, neighborhoods? Because I know you've seen, you know, you pass the neighborhoods you've grown up now, or in education. What differences, we'll talk about the differences. What differences do you see from back when you were growing up to now on, like, the living conditions and where you grew up, education as a whole, race relations, anything like that?
Well, I can probably make the same kind of comparisons now in life as when I was growing up, because the situation is kind of similar. When my husband and I moved to this home where we are now and we were raising our children, it was predominantly white. Their high school, their elementary school, their church was predominantly white, and I feel they had a very good education. Now, having seen these same schools and my grandchildren attending them, I can see where there is some lacking in the education because the area is now predominantly black. So I do believe that there are changes that occur when neighborhoods go from predominantly white to predominantly black. And I think services and education also suffers.
So why, scoot back from the mic a little bit, you don't have to talk into it. So why do you think, because I mean, of course you're talking about like let's say North, for example, where I went at McClure North. That was when my mom and Uncle George went, it was all white. There were the few black kids.
Yes.
But when I went, it's all black. It's all black. And so you're saying that the quality of the school, the reputation is a little further. And that just happens to be, it's not because it's an all black school, not, I guess, directly, right? But as those changes start to happen, then certain people start to leave, certain opportunities, right? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, I think there are a lot of factors that go into the changing of the school. One would probably be the parents, the the parental participation in the school. Of course, the teachers have changed, and let's face it, students today are much more difficult than students of yesterday.
Right, and because I've read something about that just the quality of education can go down in predominantly black areas because a lot of teachers aren't really wanting to go to those areas, so then they just settle for anybody. A lot of those better educational opportunities don't want to involve themselves with those types of schools because maybe like the reputation. Like I think now maybe 3 or 4 people have been killed at North. So I guess sometimes they don't want to be associated with those things.
Well, I know during my years as a teacher, I taught at Barrington School in the Hazelwood School District, and I was hired into Hazelwood School District as the result of a racial discrimination suit brought against Hazelwood by the government. And I was named as a defendant in that case. And so the Hazelwood School District lost, and Hazelwood had to hire me. I do remember my third school in Hazelwood was a very new school in a predominantly white neighborhood. The homes were very upscale. Lots of affluent people lived there. And as the demographics changed, what I noticed making a difference in the quality of education was primarily parental participation. The black parents seemed to leave everything up to the teachers. Also, many of the black parents were working parents.
Right.
Many of the white parents were not, and so they were available to just be there when needed at the school. I think also that a lot of black parents do not understand or realize the power that they have just being parents, and so they do not take advantage of it and make sure they are getting all that they can from their school.
Right. And so that can have a direct... because I think all of it relates to really the quality of education, which then relates to where the school is. In terms of just the lack of... Because, you think about it as money all the time, but it's not necessarily always money. That's a big thing, but there's a lack of cash flow in the community. The crime rates are higher, so that shapes kids and parents' mindsets, and I think it's a trickle effect that we don't always talk about.
One thing I always wanted to do when I left the classroom was do a report on an affluent area in North County where the parents were had very good jobs and the homes were very nice, and compare the school statistics to an area in West County where the parents, the economics were pretty much the same, the homes were pretty much the same, and just show this to one of the black schools and say the homes are about the same, the money is about the same. What is the difference in the quality of education or the performance of the students in this school compared to a West County school?
Right.
And what I really wanted them to see was parental participation had a lot to do with it. But I never got around to doing that.
Yeah. So you're saying that, I guess, comparing people from two different areas, would maybe help that quality of education. I see. So, okay. So I want to go back to your upbringing and discuss a little bit about gentrification. Britannica defines gentrification as the process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing, and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process. So can you talk a little bit about gentrification, or maybe the lack thereof when you were growing up? How maybe the whites moved in and the blacks moved out, or the blacks moved in and the whites moved out. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I remember when my husband and I were purchasing our first home, our real estate agent was very caring of us, and he was not wanting to sell us a home in a particular area because he said in 5 years that area would be redlined. Mm-hmm. And of course we didn't understand what that was. And so he explained it to us. But we said we didn't really mind the area turning black with the white families moving out. We really liked the house. So
where was this?
This was in North County in Paddock Meadows.
Okay.
Not Paddock Meadows, Hathaway Manor North.
Okay.
So he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll sell you this house, but I want you to move in 5 years. And we said fine, because we just wanted to buy that home. Mm-hmm. And about 4 years later, believe it or not, he did come back, and he said it was time for us to go. And I had noticed flyers in the mail soliciting my home for sale. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't think much about it. But I noticed that some of the white families had started moving out. And
this was when you guys were the only black family in the neighborhood.
Well, we were not the only black family in the neighborhood, but there were very few blacks in the neighborhood.
So as the African American population started climbing, the white population was like, no, we got to go.
Right, it was declining. Right. Mm-hmm. And I know in the city of St. Louis, they were doing some renovations, and a lot of the residents of the projects were given subsidies like Section 8, and they were put into homes in our area. And this probably happened to other areas also. These families were put into these homes as rental units. And of course, the property values went down, or started going down. It was not that bad at first. They started going down. These families did not have a very good idea of how to keep up their property, to take care of a yard or a lawn.
Right.
So I feel by raising the area in downtown St. Louis and moving people out who could no longer afford to live there, then they were pulling down other areas.
Okay. So your real estate agent had kind of some insider knowledge on the biz, because he knew that they were going to start moving people into that neighborhood, and that would drive the property value down.
Yes, and that was so interesting the way it happened, just as he had said. And we did start looking for another home, and we couldn't find anything we really liked. And like I said before, we weren't necessarily looking for an all-white area. Mm-hmm. We just wanted a nice home. And he happened to have one that he sold us here in Paddock Meadows. Mm-hmm. And it was an all-white neighborhood, which I was surprised at, because I did not realize there were a lot of all-white neighborhoods anymore in the North County area. but we were the second black family in the neighborhood.
And the property value in Paddock Meadows was higher than the one in Hathaway North.
It was. The property value was much higher, but the interesting thing is the first year he came, which was like our fourth year, the very first couple that looked at our home offered us what we were asking, but we did not find a house that year.
Right.
And so because we had done a contingency contract that gave us an opportunity to get out of that sale. And so we kept looking, and the following year, believe it or not, our property sold $10,000 more than that year before. And because he put us in a home that he had foreclosed on, or it was a foreclosure, he gave it to us at a very good rate. And our home, which we left our 2-bedroom home, and we moved into a 5-bedroom home, our house note was considerably less than the people who purchased our 2-bedroom home. So the prices weren't that different, but it was just something interesting that I thought we were very blessed to have Mr. Smart, that was his name, as an agent.
So I guess Mr. Smart was smart then. Because so you kind of had a, I don't want to call it reverse gentrification, but you were in an area where the property value was driven down because of people moving in. Because usually we were in this area and, they put a big shiny new building or a big shiny new house on the end, and then the property value went up, and then 4 more appeared. That's the usual story, but yours is interesting because you experienced the road less traveled, I'll call it, I guess. And that's interesting. So do you think that any of these things can have an upside to it? I guess like gentrification, do you think that could have any upsides? Do you think that benefits anybody except for the wealthy, or no?
I think it would benefit those owners within that area who are not renting, so their rent would not be driven up. But if they were property owners,
right,
then their value would go up, and they would be experiencing many of the economic advantages that those moving in were experiencing.
But I think a lot of us, and I mean us as in black people, we don't tend to own our homes. I mean, I guess especially younger, I'm talking about maybe like 30, ages 30 to 40, they don't own their homes. They're usually renting. So they're usually on the back end of the gentrification deal.
Yeah.
So, but I guess I never thought about it like that. Even if you are black and you own property, then
in that area
you can benefit from the big wealthy whites coming in. So, I guess I never thought about that. So, I guess some steps or solutions would be to own property, to own land. And I guess that starts with just economic advantages and different opportunities. So do you think there are any other steps or solutions that any of the city of St. Louis could employ to improve the living or anything like that?
Well, in the areas where they're doing the gentrification, sometimes those people who were original inhabitants and were able to stay, I think if there were opportunities for them to be educated, I don't want to say on the finer things in life, but to just have community centers and areas are businesses or outlets for the people to go and improve themselves and their children.
And that's interesting you say that, because I said that same thing in my paper. I was saying that I think the key to all of this is just educating our people, educating the people about, and like you said, you don't want to say the finer things in life, but just educating and saying, hey, like, there is more than just this block. There is more than just this street. And it actually relates to a quote that I had in my paper, and this was another question, but you kind of touched on it already. Tashara Jones said, if more people were aware of the systemic racism that is causing this poverty, then there could potentially be an increase in community outreach to the more or less fortunate areas of St. Louis City and County. I think a lot of, you'd be surprised how many black people don't know what gentrification is. They're not even aware of that that's a thing, that it's like, that it's planned for them to move. You know, it's really a mindset. And so you're saying that educating our people and saying, hey, you need to buy property, we need to own land, we need to be more aware of the opportunities in our city, then you're saying that we'd be better off. And I think I agree. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, that was a nice interview. Thank you for talking with me and supplying your knowledge and past. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right.